Well, we're going to be studying in chapters 13, 14, and 15 in the text. And of course, as we've been doing, we're going to uh, look at different aspects of this. And we might take a little time at the end, if we have time this morning, to read some of Moses' song, because it's so powerful in its expression and meaningful, even to us, I think. So you remember the Song of Moses and the Lamb by and by in our songs and in the book of Revelation that is suggested for us. So we may take a few minutes at the end to read some of his psalm. I want to thank Rick. Rick did such a good job. We listened in. We were able to do that in the afternoon because these lessons are posted on YouTube. So if you miss something, you can pick it up at almost any time later on. And that's a good thing for us to have a backup. And if you think we missed something in class while you're here, you can go home and review and pick it up then. So there are all kinds of uses of some of the studies that we post online. Rick did a great job telling us about the Passover period of time. And I want to go back and pick up just a little bit in the early part of chapter 13 that takes us into the Exodus itself. The Exodus itself, of course, is the movement of all these people out of Egypt. And a couple of things I think it would be good for us to be aware of with regard to that. These are our dates here, and these are the purposes. Our Exodus is going to take us from Ramses area of Goshen, which is in actually the southern area, they call it, of Egypt. We look at a map like this and it looks like north, but they would recognize it as being in the south of their area. And we'll go out and down across the Red Sea and onto the Sinai Peninsula, as you see it on the map, and down to a place that is generally thought to be the Mount Sinai, where the Israelites encamped for about a year down there. We'll look at that maybe next time a little bit. The nation of Israel, God said to Abraham, I will make of you a great nation. The nation has roots, of course, in a single family, but it is identified as a nation when they are given their national law and their national identity. They're kind of seen as a family prior to the Exodus. But when they come out of the Exodus, they will be made into a nation. And this nation is made with a law, a great law that God gives to them, moral law, but containing also civil law. So the law of Moses is a comprehensive kind of law. It has the ecclesiastical side, the religious side. It's a religious law, a spiritual law. It's also contains much moral definition, and then it has civil law within it. And once they go into the land and the last part of the law is given to them, they're even told to have uh, railings on their houses up above, And I sometimes kid with my classes at school and tell them that God told them how fast to drive their chariots. I mean, it was pretty stiff civil law that was included. Some of it after the Pentateuch developed among the people, of course, some of their Sabbath observances and most of their multiple feasts and fasts were developed after the Pentateuch. I'll show you something of that in just a minute. But you need to kind of realize what the people are. God even gave them their own calendar. As a people, they became identified with a timing set that God gave to them. And this calendar began when they began as a nation, when the Exodus took place, when they came out of Egypt as a people under God's. It was going to be a theocratic government, the rule by God, theos, God. They are going to be ruled by God. And that's why when we get over to where King Saul is chosen, God is displeased because he is displaced in this whole matter. So it becomes important. But God gave them a new calendar. It's like the world started over again with their coming out of Egypt. The Exodus symbolizes newness for them. So he called this first month at the Passover the month of Abib. And that's what it was called in the beginning. You can look at Exodus 13. Do you have it? Verse 4. I think it's verse 4. The month of Abib. Do you see that? Now, when we get to the calendar of the Jews later on, about the time of Christ, between the end of the Babylonian captivity and the birth of Christ, here, those later books of the Old Testament, occasionally this is going to be called Nisan, the month of Nisan. So it's a little difficult for us. I'll talk to you here in a minute about the change that takes place. So after the Babylonian captivity, the month of Abib is called Nisan. And that month corresponded to our third and fourth months in our calendar today. So that Passover is going to take place when? In March or April, you see. April 22nd is going to be the next one coming up. coming up in the spring. So the Passover took place in what we would call spring time. You see, all right? Now, the seventh month is important. The first month and the seventh month, of course, the seventh month would be halfway through the year, right? Right on halfway through the year. So that's the month Tishri in the Jewish calendar. And this is when the Feast of Trumpets takes place. But the Feast of Trumpets is identified with Rosh Hashanah, which is now Jewish New Year's. So are you totally confused yet? Because God said Abib is the first month of the year, and now we've got New Year's, Rosh Hashanah, as Tishri, the seventh month. So we'll look at that in just a minute. This seventh month was associated with the beginning of their agricultural cycle, and most of their feasts are identified with the agricultural times, the harvest later on, and the beginning of it. You recognize that these from your biblical study, that much of their feast times were associated with their harvests and their crops and so on, you see. Okay? The Talmudic rabbis, the Talmud and the Mishnah are other writings of the Jewish rabbis, not the Bible. Other Jewish writings. They're like commentaries that the Jewish people did on how their religion developed for them, how these and we have these long multiple volumes of books in the library out at the college out here. You could go and read them if you'd like, but they're good. But these show differing sets of verses in the Old Testament and among the prophets, where these terms, Nisan and Abib, are used as we go along. And the historians cite evidence from the ancient Near East, looking at New Year's celebrated by the neighboring peoples. See, they didn't take up the Jewish calendar. And so they associate the civil New Year, which is Tishra, the Rosh Hashanah, with the creation, the original creation of the world, rather than with the Passover, New Year's, you see. So that's kind of where that comes in together. I thought I would just show you, because we haven't done too much with modern Jewish practice, and hopefully we'll have a time when we can do a little more of that, because I think it would be interesting and valuable to you, and especially if you have Jewish friends, you'd want to recognize these names like Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah. Do you all don't use those terms very often, do you? And you probably would do well to at least recognize what they mean, particularly if you have any Jewish friends. But this chart is intended simply to show you the feasts that took place under the Pentateuch, that is the original law feasts. And you remember the Jews were told, go to Jerusalem 3 times a year. Once the capital was established at Jerusalem, they were to go 3 times a year, and they were to go for Passover, for Pentecost, and for Tabernacles. You see. All right. And I've even went in and got the dates for next year if you want to check it out as we go. April 22nd is the beginning of Passover. Pentecost comes 50 days later. You remember, 7 weeks later, and that's in June. And then Tabernacles is in October. Okay? Feast of Trumpets is in October. So those correlate very closely. You should know the Jews had only one day of fasting originally in the Pentateuch, and it was the Day of Atonement. The Day of Atonement. Now, in Jesus' day, there were multiple feast days, and the Jews recognized those as special observances too. And there were other, fast days. Did I say fasting days? All right, there were other fasting days, and they created other feasts as well. Okay, this is kind of interesting to you. God gave the Jews a weekly observance. They were to rest as God rested on the seventh day, and they were to worship Him. It was get your mind clear, stay at home, don't travel, don't work. Could go to the synagogue and worship on the Sabbath day and remember God. Good, huh? Then they did that every week. Like we come every week. God still wants us to come every week. Then the new moon, that's monthly. The cycle of the moon is monthly, right? So they were to do that, and it was a day of thanksgiving to God for the month. And then the year, they had the Day of Atonement. That was an annual observance, as you see. So they had a weekly and a monthly and an annual observance every year. Important to them these days. Then every 7th year, they had the sabbatical year, and every 50th year, they had the Jubilee year. And we'll talk about these feasts and fasts and all of that a little later on. All right? The conservatives date the Exodus at 1440, some 1445, years before Christ. Okay? So you can mark that down. Some have the actual Exodus date at 1445, calculated with references through the prophets and the kings and all of that. So we'll look at that a little later on. All right. Any questions so far? Maybe talk too much about that, but I wanted you to be aware of how their thinking developed a little bit as they went along. Now, our text tells us that there were 600,000 Israelite men on foot, besides the children that go out in the Exodus. They're later numbered at 603,550 men above age 20. That's in the Numbers text, I think, there. And another time, even later, they're numbered at 601,730 men above age 20, you see. Now, that's interesting because there have been all kinds of efforts to say that many people this couldn't happen. Not that many people. Well, what they say is we're misreading or mistranslating the word thousand. And what that should mean is 100 instead of 1,000. The problem is it happens 3 times in the Old Testament text. We get these dates. These numbers. And these numbers are very specific in the latter 2 cases. And so you couldn't drop it to 600 because then you don't have the other numbers in the totals, you see. You don't have them. So such would bode in the neighborhood of about a population of about 2 million is what is usually thought to be the number coming out of the people. About 2 million people. They were told to multiply, and they multiplied. Exceedingly, yes. Well, just take Jacob's family, for example. Jacob had 12 sons, plus at least one daughter that is named because her story enters in as an essential item in the history. But we don't know how many daughters he had, you see. And so if you have this many people, you're going to have a couple million people. Plus, we are told that a mixed multitude went out with them. Who would that be, do you think? It's going to be a guess, so you're not going to be wrong. All right. Egyptians that were unhappy. Maybe some of the Israelites had intermarried with some of the Egyptians. Maybe. We don't know exactly where this mixed multitude originated, but at least they wanted to come out with the Israelites, and they did. We don't know how many of them there really were, whether they're counted in some way or not. But just think now about the amount of people that are in this Exodus and how miraculously God provided for them in the wilderness. That's a key element in our understanding, I think. Yes? I don't know it if there was. You mean the national... Yeah. I read somewhere sometime, and I don't trust my memory like I used to, somewhere between 6 and 10 million population of Egyptians. But I don't remember where I read that, and it's just popping into my mind, so nobody take it as the last word on that one. Yes?
I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I can't remember the verse where it's at, but wasn't there a concern, the Egyptians were concerned about the growth of the
Oh, yeah.
people,
Oh, yeah.
growing, they felt would
Be overtaken, yeah, by it. Yeah, that's probably right. Yes, I know that's in the text. Okay? Now, when they go out, just picture in your mind now, you want to close your eyes? Close your eyes and just picture yourself in the midst of this 2 million people leaving and traveling all together. You know. And Linda and I went out west with her brother and his family, and there were upper teens of us all together, and that was too many at once. So you can imagine 2 million people coming out all together. Okay? They took out with them the sarcophagus holding the bones of Joseph. Apparently, he had been mummified down in Egypt, and they were able to carry him out. He had made them promise that they would take him back to the promised land. So they're going to carry him. We'll see a little later what happens with his burial and all of that. But he'll be transported with them. And that's pretty symbolic, I think, if you think about it, how that they took him out with them to their land. Okay, that's in Exodus 13, verse 19, if you want to read that. Let me just do that right quick. See, I think I've got it open here. Verse 19, Moses took the bones of Joseph with him, for he had placed the children of Israel under solemn oath, saying, God will surely visit you, and you shall carry up my bones from here with you. So they took their journey from Succoth and camped in Etham at the edge of the wilderness. And the Lord went before them by day in a pillar of cloud to lead them the way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light, so as to go by day and night. He did not take away the pillar of cloud by day or the pillar of fire by night from before the people. So that's pretty amazing what he did. The Lord led them by a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire to give them light by night. Isn't that what that did? That did several things. It's going to protect them, for one thing. This cloud is. When the Egyptians come after them and they're up against the Red Sea over here and the Egyptian army over here attacking them, what does God do? He moved the cloud back between them and the pillar of fire. The cloud was a pillar of fire that they couldn't pass through, you see. So he protected them with it. He would guide them with this cloud. They were to follow the cloud. When the cloud stopped, they were to stop. When the cloud moved, they were to move. and they were to go wherever the cloud went, that's where they went. What does that symbolize to them? God's presence is with them, God's protection is with them, and God's guidance is with them. Always in that cloud, when they saw that cloud, you see. And in chapter 40, at the very end, when they get of Exodus, when they get to the tabernacle construction, they build the tabernacle, they get it all set up, and God says, you all come together in a holy convocation, and he brought the cloud down on the tabernacle. I mean, you just sit back and wonder, why did these people grumble so much and complain and fuss and doubt God and wish they had gone back to Egypt? Why did these people do all that when God is right there every day in that cloud, like you say, Michael? Yes. Exactly. Exactly. And great thought. Okay. Well, Pharaoh's heart was hardened. He changed his mind from allowing them to go and pursuing them toward the Red Sea. He brought his army out there. And God caused them to cause the sea to divide. And they walked through the sea. That must have been amazing in itself. That is called up throughout their history as the sign, really, of the Exodus, was the division of the Red Sea, and that was their escape route, was through the sea. Amazingly. That cloud was back before them, or back behind them, and it kept the Egyptians out through all of that period. Okay. I mentioned this to you just as an aside. I thought you would be interested to know, because you may have heard something said about this. This is in 2014, October 24th. A website published an article reporting that chariot wheels and the bones of horses and men had been discovered at the bottom of the Red Sea, therefore supposedly proving archaeological that the Israelites escaped the Egyptians. That has been shown to be a hoax. So you don't want to put your faith in that. But that's what was published. According to the book of Exodus, God parted the Red Sea long enough for the Moses-led Israelites to walk across on dry ground, closed the water up again upon the pursuing Egyptian army, and drowned them all. So they drowned in the Red Sea. Okay. Interesting. So the Exodus is going to take them down to Mount Sinai, and we'll look at that next week. Now, we have just a little time. I wanted to read some so you'd get the flavor of how they felt about God having crossed the Red Sea. And so we have two songs, really, that are used to proclaim faith in God and to recognize the power of God. One is the song of Moses, and one is the song of Miriam. The song of Miriam is much shorter. But let's look at chapter 15 in your text. begins, Moses and the children of Israel sang this song to the Lord. I will sing to the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. The horse and its rider he has thrown into the sea. Who is that? That's the Egyptians, of course. The Lord is my strength and song, and he has become my salvation. He is my God, and I will praise him, my father's God, and I will exalt him. So who would their fathers be? Who did they see as their fathers? Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The God of my fathers, Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. That keeps coming up. They will be as still as a stone. No, let's see, I'm moving on too much here. The Lord is a man of war. The Lord is his name. Pharaoh's chariots and his army he has cast into the sea. His chosen captains also are drowned in the sea. The depths have covered them. They sank to the bottom like a stone. Your right hand, O Lord, has become glorious in power. Your right hand, O Lord, has dashed the enemy in pieces. And in the greatness of your excellence, you have overthrown those who rose against you. You sent forth your wrath. It consumed them like stubble. And with the blast of your nostrils, the waters have gathered together. The floods stood upright like a heap. The depths congealed in the heart of the sea. The enemy said, I will pursue, I will overtake, I will divide the spoil. My desire shall be satisfied on them. I will draw my sword. My hand shall destroy them. You blew with your wind. The sea covered them. They sank like lead in the mighty waters. Powerful, isn't it? And such a great expression of faith and understanding of what this was all about, what the cause was. Who is like you, O Lord? Verse 11, among the gods. Who is like you, glorious in holiness, fearful in praises, doing wonders. You stretched out your right hand, the earth swallowed them. You in your mercy have led forth the people whom you have redeemed. You have guided them in your strength to your holy habitation. So this is Moses' song, the song of Moses. So what is it? A song of what, would you say? It's a song of praise. It's a song of redemption. It's a song of salvation. So when we get to the end of the Old Testament, or the New Testament, get to the end of the New Testament, we're going to have the song of Moses and the Lamb. Who's the Lamb? That's Jesus Christ. So the song of Moses represents the salvation of those people from the slavery of the Egyptians, and the song of the Lamb speaks to the salvation of God's people in the gospel age, redemption from sin, salvation from sin, doesn't it? And so you get all of that, the song of Moses and the Lamb, and we'll sing that by and by. You see, right? Okay. The people will hear and be afraid. Sorrow will take hold of the inhabitants of Philistia. So now he's prophesying the future of the nation. Then the chiefs of Edom will be dismayed, the mighty men of Moab. Trembling will take hold of them, and the inhabitants of Canaan will melt them. So when these nations hear what God has done in the deliverance of the Israelites from Egypt, they will shake and be afraid, you see. The Edomites, the Moabites, the other Canaanites, the Philistines, you see. God led them not by the way of the Philistines, lest they be fearful. He's as already said, he's going to lead them around rather than straight through the Philistines. But once the Philistines get the message of what God has done, they'll fear it also, you see. Okay? Fear and dread will fall on them by the greatness of your arm. They will be as still as a stone till your people pass over, O Lord. Till the people pass over whom you have purchased, you will bring them in and plant them in the mountain of your inheritance, in the place, O Lord, which you have made for your own dwelling, which your hands have established. So what we get in all of this is a kind of a psalm, much like David's psalms, but this one is written by Moses. And then in verse 21, Miriam responds. Miriam, the prophetess, the sister of Aaron, took the timbrel in her hand, and all the women went out with her with timbrels and with dances. Just a kind of a side note, let me just say, once in a while you'll hear somebody say, well, Miriam led a singing in the Israelite camp. And so we have a woman leading the worship. What does your verse say? It says she took the women out aside and they sang together. But it doesn't say she led the worship of the convocated Israelites altogether, you see. And here's their song is much like Moses' song, isn't it? Sing to the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. The horse and its rider he has thrown in the sea. Okay? So that brings us down then to get them across the Red Sea and on their way down into Egypt. So we'll get that next week.